Auction block plantation life. You have just heard how our ancestors were sold off by the Africans to the Europeans for mere trinkets, packed like sardines on ships named after the gods of the Gentiles and carried across the seas to the New World. So what happened to them when they got here? For those of our people who survived the trip, which was brutal in and of itself, what kind of life awaited them when they reached the shores of America? Did they sunbathe on the beach like many folks do today when they take a trip to a foreign country? I think not. That's not the life that awaited the Hebrew slaves. They were carted like cattle, led to a very literal slaughter. From the second their feet hit the soil, they were treated like the property they were. Families were taken to town in an open area like Atlanta's very own Marietta Square, shackled by the neck, arms, and feet, and thrown up on auction blocks where they were auctioned off and sold in an open market. Oh yes, the buying of black slaves was big business that was highly profitable in more ways than one. The European landowners, who had already decimated the native Indians, eagerly awaited the arrival of these black slaves. They had long discovered that there was a fortune to be made in the New World from sugar, cotton, tobacco, and rice. All they needed to reap the rewards was cheap labor, slaves to till the land and produce their increase. An excerpt from the book entitled A Pictorial History of the Negro in America reads,
Whenever a slave ship sailed into a colonial port on the American mainland, its arrival was announced by a town crier or by an advertisement in the local newspaper. It was customary to separate Negroes of the same family and to disperse relatives. The father might be sold to Maryland, the mother to the Carolinas, and the children scattered from Virginia to the Gulf, never to see each other again.
Can you imagine? Those of you who are mothers, really try to visualize this process. Hearing the screams of the children you have given birth to ripped from you and sold off to total strangers, never to be seen again. Men watch their women be stripped, groped, examined, and traded for goods, sold off like cattle to plantations far from them, never to be seen again. Men strong and vibrant, treated like brute beasts, powerless to protect their families, powerless to do anything about it at all. One advertisement from 1784 read,
Negroes for sale. A cargo of very fine stout men and women in good order and fit for immediate service.
Once these newly purchased slaves arrived on the plantations they would call home, they were branded with an identifying mark from a red-hot iron and given new names associated with the surname or last name of the one who now owned them. And we, as their children of many generations after, still carry the names of those slave masters today. In America, slavery was legal and auctions became the primary method of sale, even right here in Atlanta. Women who could cook, sew, bear children, or serve as wet nurses were a hot commodity. But the first thing the slave master needed to do was learn how to make a good slave. He had to ensure that his investment would go a long way. He needed slaves who would breed generations born with inferior servitude. We all remember the infamous speech given by Willie Lynch on the bank of the James River. He was a British slave owner who wanted to share his method of breeding obedient slaves with the rest of his kinsmen. The basis of his teachings was this: keep the body, take the mind, and cause them to perpetuate it for hundreds of years. On the plantation, boys and girls, young and old, were made to work in the fields from sunup to sundown, hacking away at sugar canes. They worked in snake-infested rice fields, sowing seed in conditions that bred mosquitoes and malaria. They planted corn, rice, and potatoes, cleared fields, and picked cotton. The slaves killed the hogs and salted the meat, an unclean animal whose dead carcass the God of Israel forbade them to even touch. All done under a blistering hot sun and under the careful eye of their overseer carrying his very intimidating whip. Ex-slave Solomon Northup told of his ritual of working in the fields.
The hands were required to be in the cotton fields as soon as it is light in the morning. They are not permitted to be a moment idle until it is too dark to see. They do not dare to stop, however late it be, until the order to halt is given by the driver.
Then, when it was time to halt as the moon shined bright and the tired and worn bodies were allowed to go home, The union with their family was often interrupted by the summoning of a woman by her white master. American slave masters are known for the rape and sexual demoralizing of our black women. How many of them did lay with another man's wife, as he was powerless to do anything about it? The next thing the slave man knows, his wife gives birth to a child that is not his pigmentation. This child is branded a mulatto, yet still lives as a slave because he or she bears one drop of black blood. We remember when the 2-century-long dispute over whether or not America's third president, Thomas Jefferson, had fathered children with his slave woman, Sally Hemings, and it wasn't until technology lent itself to DNA testing that it was confirmed that he indeed fathered all 6 of Sally Hemings' children. Whips was the most commonly used tool to punish slaves. How many times have we heard the stories of our ancestors being whipped to the point of death? The darker your skin was, the more cruelly you were treated. Our men were broken down in front of their wives, children, and especially other men, and beat within an inch of their lives, and many times were whipped to death as an example to other male slaves of what would befall them if they did not bow down in total submission. As one slave recounts from the book The Last Decades of Slavery,
Them days was hell, when they could tie you up to a tree with your face to the tree and your arms fastened tight round it, and with a long curling whip bring blood with every blow, and folks from a mile away could hear them awful whippings.
they were bound up or tied to the floor with heavy weights on his chest. And if all of that brutality were not enough, another form of their abuse, which some could argue may have been worse because it has had a much more lasting and spiritually devastating effect, was when they gave us the gods of their religions, which further moved us as a nation away from Yahweh. How is it possible that this could happen to a nation of people? Why, for hundreds of years, was this nation powerless to fight back?
Who gave Yaakov for a spoil and Israel to the robbers? Did not Yah? He against whom we have sinned, for they would not walk in his ways, neither were they obedient unto his law. Therefore he has poured upon him the fury of his anger and the strength of battle, and it has set him on fire round about, yet he knew it not, and it burned him, yet he laid it not to heart.
An ex-slave reflecting on the cruelty of slavery said,
I ain't never seen how God can forgive those mean white folks for what they have done way back yonder.